Hello everybody, welcome to my Gardevoir team analysis. This is the Gardevoir team that I have been using on the channel for a while. I also took this to Utah Regionals as well as the midseason the following day. Yeah, and also just note that I did not create this whole team by myself. It was given to me by Adrian Siegler-Endrake, who goes by Slagaloo VGC Online. I'll have a slide on that a little bit later, but just to let you know that that's where I got all the original sets for this team and then kind of modified it for myself. And without further ado, let's get into the specific team that I used and the sets that I kind of modified to my liking. Alright, so the first Pokemon is definitely the centerpiece of the whole team and what the team's really built around, which is Gardevoir. And this is the spread that, or at least really close to the spread that I got from Adrian. The HP and defense is the same, and the HP and defense does live a -1 Iron Head from a Jolly Metagross, which is pretty crucial, and I actually learned that a little later than I should have, but special attack just kind of hits a point where I get 1 extra point. The special defense is what I dumped into left over after everything else, which does live a Gengar Sludge Bomb, and it has about a 69% chance to live Hydro Vortex from Ludicolo in the Rain, which is pretty good odds, I would say. And then the speed is to speed creep other Gardevoir. It was a little slower before, despite outspeeding Jolly Tyranitar, so I wanted to add a little bit more to speed creep what I felt like was a pretty good number that would outspeed most Gardevoir. And then moveset's pretty standard. You got Hyper Voice for just strong spread damage, which is the main reason we use Gardevoir. With that Pixelate boost and the stab, it's a very powerful spread move. Psychic was chosen. Originally the team had Psy Shock, but I ended up switching to Psychic like right before the tournament because I really wanted to hit Amoonguss harder, because most Amoonguss tend to be physically bulky from my experience, and Psychic was just a much more efficient way at picking off Amoonguss, whether at full or near full, or at least with a little bit of chip rather. And then Trick Room, pretty normal in Gardevoir nowadays. It's a really good control move for Gardevoir, and then Protect is just necessary for a Pokemon like Gardevoir. Alright, so the next Pokemon, Tapu Koko here, pretty standard set, just max speed, max special attack, just to do as much damage as possible and outspeed almost the entire unboosted metagame. I did have a different kind of spread than I normally did with the 4-4-4 and the defenses. I ended up liking this. This is what Adrian gave me, because it does kind of give that 1 extra point in overall, like your stat total, as well as, you know, getting an extra point in one of the defenses. Well, yeah, in each defense as well as the HP. And the 1 point less in special attack really didn't make a difference, where you never know when that 1 extra point of defense or special defense could change a roll slightly ever into your favor. So, pretty satisfied with that. Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Dazzling Gleam, Protect, really standard on Koko. Volt Switch, really solid move for pivoting pivoting Koko out into a better position, and then saving it more for the late game, which that's kind of something I had to learn how to use Koko a lot better over time. Because what's funny is, in 2017 I hated using Koko at first, and then when I finally started trying to use it, it took me like a good month to get the hang of Tapu Koko, to where I really want to save it as a cleaner. Back then I used Taunt instead, but now I'm using Volt Switch, and it is a really good way to lead and pressure, pivot out, save it in the back for late game, because Koko with that speed is really good at cleaning up. And that's kind of one of the big roles on this team, is pressure early and then also stay in the back for the late game cleanup. Alright, and here we've got the big daddy, Snorlax, everyone's favorite Pokemon to deal with ever since Gen 7 came out. Anyway, so another pretty standard set. The set that I got from Adrian was just max HP, max defense, and I kind of wanted a little bit more attack power in my Snorlax, just for I can take out some of the more bulky stuff at +5, like Amoonguss, for example, with a little bit of attack, or at least it guarantees the OHKO. And then this set does live the Shattered Psyche from Modest Tapu Lele in Psychic Terrain, which is really important for Snorlax to do, because that's one of the most powerful attacks in the game. And then I'm just dumping the rest into defense in order to just maximize its bulk overall with that, because since defense is its lowest. Because when I set up a Belly Drum, just having all that extra attack doesn't really matter too much. So one thing to note here is that I have a little bit of speed there, that 4 speed EVs, as well as a non-speed reducing nature. I have an Impus nature instead. The reasoning for that is I wanted to outspeed other Snorlax that were min speed and outspeed stuff that was trying to outspeed minimum speed Snorlax. And my thought here is that I'm not really using Trick Room as like my main mode. It's just an option to have with Snorlax. And against other Trick Room teams, I like to have Snorlax being faster when I can either reverse Trick Room or, you know, just be outside of Trick Room, because sometimes they may not want to set up Trick Room because of Snorlax. And it does give me an advantage in some matchups and situations. And then also, last thing, the original set I got from Adrian had Protect over High Horsepower. I switched to High Horsepower because I really wanted the coverage on Snorlax. And Protect was cool at times, but not completely necessary, and so that's why I made the change there. Alright, and here the next Pokemon is the Pokemon I think, at least for me, I can't run Gardevoir without Amoonguss. I think they pair up so well together and they synergize so well together that it's really hard for me to use Gardevoir without Amoonguss. And so Amoonguss, very crucial member of this team, kind of almost the glue in a lot of matchups, because it does support Snorlax and Koko very well by redirecting attacks aimed at it or letting Snorlax set up. So that was the big thing there. I did run a relaxed nature and a lot of physical defense, because the main job for Amoonguss was to take those big hits, big physical type attacks from, or for Gardevoir rather. So it takes those hits really well. Like I think Iron Head is a guaranteed 3-hit KO against Amoonguss from a Metagross. And then this also lives a Zen Headbutt from Metagross outside of Psychic Terrain. Special Defense lives a Psychic from Modest Lele outside of Psychic Terrain. That one actually doesn't really come into play much because I rarely bring Amoonguss against Tapu Lele. And against Lele and Metagross, I definitely don't really bring it, since Zen Headbutt is still a threat from Metagross. Just a Pinch Berry on Amoonguss just to give it more longevity, especially paired up with Regenerator. This thing can stay around for a long time, especially with how much I pivot the team. Regenerator really comes into play. Ran min speed because I did have Trick Room and has also helped against other Trick Room teams. I went Sludge Bomb, Spore, Rage Fire, Protect, really standard. I opted for Sludge Bomb over Clear Smog because I like the extra damage it does to Koko, because it really deals with Koko that way, and even Tapu Bulu for that matter. Like there's times where Clear Smog would be helpful, and I think it's still worth experimenting with, so you guys can kind of choose what you like. I would try them both out for sure, because I think they're both very viable. Just depends on what you feel like you need when you play with the team. Alright, this next Pokemon is a huge reason why Gardevoir, Snorlax, Koko kind of idea really works. What's funny is before the format, I wanted to try Gardevoir Snorlax, but I felt like I really needed something like Intimidate and Incineroar. And it's funny is Adrian also, him and another player were talking about that and like early format, but just didn't work. And then when Intimidate and Incineroar came out, you know, they pulled the trigger and built the team where I hadn't started working on it yet. So, but it was kind of worked out because I did get the team from them, and really love it. Really, really nice. I opt for Figgy Berry. I do like Pinch Berry a lot on Incineroar. I think it synergizes well with Flare Blitz, similar to Pinch Berry Arcanine and Flare Blitz last format. So the spread here, I feel like it's pretty standard. What I do is the HP and Special Defense lives Gigavolt Havoc from a Timid Koko in Electric Terrain, and then it also activates the Berry at that point. For defense, I originally had 12 to guarantee, or really close to guarantee. Stomping Tantrum from -1 Metagross was a guaranteed 3-hit KO, not taking the Berry into account even. But I realized I didn't really need that because it's still a really good chance in my favor without the extra 8 EVs. So I just went with the 4, and Intimidate kind of covers that. 52 attack, kind of just what I had left over. I want to hit at least 36. And then after I hit the speed stat I want, I just dumped the remaining 8 EVs into attack for that. Because there was a couple of calcs where it did give me a little more favorable rolls with Flare Blitz and Knockoff. And the speed was just speed creep other Incineroar. That's a pretty normal stat for Incineroar to hit with Tailwind support. Even though I didn't have Tailwind, I like to at least at worst speed tie like other Incineroar. Moveset, pretty normal. I did run Protect as this last move. I think U-turn could be really cool here. I did like Protect. It was really good in some situations. And it is a good move, but I think U-turn is really worth considering and trying out on Incineroar, because I think it could be very valuable for, again, the pivoting that this team does, and could be a good way to get Koko in safely by having the slower U-turn. So something to consider, but Protect still a very good option. Alright, last and not least, but definitely the least used Pokemon on the team is the Landorus here. So, like I said, it's really rarely used, at least when I use the team, and it's kind of the niche pick. I think this is the most flexible slot of the whole team. I think there's a lot of experimenting I would like to do with it, and I think encourage you guys to experiment with the slot, because this would be the slot where I would try and patch up maybe some matchups I really don't like. And the one cool thing though that Landorus does do on the team that I think is really valuable is what it does in team preview. People see it and they want to like really prepare for it. They just want to play melodic. They want to bring melodic, but I rarely bring Landorus. So, but again, it does work on the team, but I would like to experiment with it some more. Namely like other Pokemon that could play the slot, because it's picked because of the typing. It's got some good immunities, and the extra Intimidate is good for some matchups. And I think I only brought it 4 times in like the 39 games I played over the weekend at the regional and mid-season. So keep that in mind. It is very, very rarely used. Original set did have AV Assault Vest as opposed to Choice Scarf. I made the switch to Choice Scarf because I noticed I was trying to bring Landorus a lot against Metagross teams, or even sometimes Gengar teams, until the Clefairy version popped up. But I really like the Scarf to just specially pressure Metagross with Earth Power rather than be pressured by Ice Punch, which AV Landorus really struggles against Ice Punch Metagross. So that's kind of why I picked Choice Scarf, and it works really well with U-Turn, because paired up with Koko plus Landorus, I could pivot a lot. And then when I had also Incineroar as well, it's a lot of Intimidates I can throw around, and that was really valuable. HP Ice hits other Landorus. Earth Power, obviously its main stab. Sludge Bomb's there. Very sparingly use it just to hit Tapus harder, fairy types mainly, but yeah, that's pretty normal. But usually you're just pricing U-Turn and Earth Power with the Pokemon. Now, when you're playing with a team, you're obviously going to want to know what to lead a lot of the times. And with this team and how I played it, at least, I was leading Gardevoir roughly around 90% of the time. And when I did the statistics for my notes, I was at about 87%. So 90% of the time is what you'll expect to lead Gardevoir with this team. So, and with that, the Gardevoir Koko lead was by far my most common lead, and it usually is in practice games, and clearly in between both tournaments I led at 14 out of 39 games, which is quite a bit. And then after that, the next most common lead was Gardevoir and Incineroar, which you can see is led in 8 out of the 39 games I played between both tournaments. And combined, I led this about 56% of the time in the 39 games I played. So like I said, Gardevoir you'll be leading like about 90% of the time if you're playing the team the same way I've been playing it. You might play differently than me, but that's definitely how I play. And then between these first 2 leads here, Gardevoir Koko and Gardevoir Incineroar, I was leading it about 50% of the time, or a little more than 50% of the time. So when not really sure what to lead, those are usually my go-to leads. I think they're really flexible. They offer a lot. Intimidate support for Gardevoir with the Incineroar lead, as well as Fake Out pressure, and then Koko has the offensive pressure with Gardevoir. What's really great about the Gardevoir Koko lead is, yeah, like I said, the offensive pressure it puts on with Giga Volt and Hyper Voice, but then I can also just pivot out with Volt Switch if I really need to and set up Hyper Voice or something. And then Gardevoir and Incineroar, like I said, has the Fake Out pressure, which can pressure Fake Out Trick Room or Fake Out Hyper Voice, especially if you lead into something that doesn't have Protect, or you lead into something where they're going to want to switch. It's just really easy to get the Hyper Voice, especially if you call the switch right and you Fake Out the Pokemon that's not switching out. So, like I said, these 2 will be your go-to leads. So the bottom 3, these were the more common ones I did during the tournament. These aren't necessarily like common leads, because the other 50% of the time you're not leading one of the top 2 leads here. You're going to have a pretty varied combination of things depending on the matchup. So like the first one here, where I lead either Gardevoir and Incineroar with Snorlax, I usually lead this against other teams that have a Trick Room mode or like heavy Trick Room mode. And they're probably going to want to set up Trick Room as their main strategy. So leading Snorlax immediately is what I want to do. I also can lead this into other Snorlax if I think my opponent's going to lead their Snorlax, especially like a Snorlax Trick Room thing. So where Incineroar Snorlax has a really good option of faking out the Trick Room setter, or faking out the other Snorlax and setting up my own Belly Drum, being in pretty good position at that point. Or faking out another Incineroar, which the speed creep is really good. And then Gardevoir Snorlax, also really good for just either reversing Trick Room and setting up Belly Drum if I really want to make that call, or to fire off a big Hyper Voice and Belly Drum. So again, this is a lot of times I was leading into potential Trick Room modes. Gardevoir Landorus, I actually used this a little more than I expected. This matchup is obviously, or this lead is very specific to certain matchups and ones that aren't maybe the most common. I think when I used this lead, it was against a Metagross team, like a Metagross Lele team, and another time I used it when the opponent was leading Nihilego, and Landorus was able to just pressure the Nihilego right off the bat. So, like I said, even though Landorus isn't used much, when I do bring it, I like to lead it a lot, especially with the U-turn, because it's kind of the same idea with Gardevoir Koko. I have that fast offensive pressure with the Gardevoir Hyper Voice, but a lot of times I'm just U-turning out and saving the Landorus for later. And then Gardevoir Amoonguss, I put on as the last one here because, again, like I said, these two pair up really well, and leading these two sometimes isn't a bad idea, because like you can just immediately redirect any physical moves that aimed at Gardevoir. And on top of that, this is also a decent lead for when you really want to set up Trick Room and your opponent doesn't have a way to stop it because they only have like single target moves, because you can Rage Powder plus Trick Room, and if Amoonguss is still around, you can start firing off Spores. So when I play an opponent that doesn't have a way to stop Spore with a terrain, a lot of times I like to lead this as long as they didn't have like a taunt and they would taunt Amoonguss. That would be really bad. It's like taunt Gengar really messes with this lead, because this is my normal lead against like Gengar teams, but with taunt Gengar it's a lot more problematic. But in situations where you want to get up Trick Room and start utilizing the Spore aspect of it, this is a pretty good lead for that. And then some other notable leads is I did Koko Lando against the Metagross Lele team. I think that's a decent lead against it. I did use Amoonguss Snorlax as a lead once against Gengar Clefairy specifically for that, because I thought that was a pretty decent lead for it. Alright, so going to talk about a couple matchups with the team here, and these are probably the two biggest matchups do you really want to know in and out, because I think these are the two kind of team archetypes that are going to give the most trouble. The first one here, Metagross, either Tapu Lele or Tapu Fini, Amoonguss, Landorus, and then the last two, Zapdos isn't really that bad. It's not really a good bring against the team, but I listed there anyways. Whereas Tyranitar, not so much either. The Incineroar with the Fini teams, Incineroar definitely could be brought. But the main one I'm going to talk about here is Metagross Lele, Amoonguss, Landorus. I find that to be one of the most devastating quad of Pokemon to bring against this team, because the way they pair up really well, they really cover each other, and it just really screws with what I want to do. Because Amoonguss can redirect like Earth Power from Landorus, trying to target Metagross. Landorus just threatens Incineroar, and it can threaten Koko, because AV Landorus is really good against Koko. Metagross just completely threatens Gardevoir, and Lele just negates my ability to fake out, plus it negates my electric train, really neutering Koko's damage output. So it's really, really tricky, and I have a couple ways to go about it. The main thing I've noticed is if you can get an early KO, like in the first couple turns of the game with or against this, that goes a long way, because I noticed that all four of those Pokemon work really well together, but once you take out one, it can leave a window wide open for a particular way. So like, for example, one of my matches against the Lele Metagross team, who's bringing these four, and he led Metagross Amoonguss, which is a really difficult lead. And what I went for was, I went ahead and just tried to take out the Amoonguss, where I Volt Switched and Psychicked, and he redirected the Volt Switch, which put him in Psychic range, took him out, and I also switched out into Incineroar to intimidate the Metagross that had Mega Evolved and survive the Iron Head. And once Amoonguss was gone, I actually had Snorlax in the back, which I wasn't bringing, so that played a big part of it. And what happened was, he didn't target down my weakened Gardevoir. Instead, he went for the Incineroar, because he wasn't expecting the Trick Room. So I got that Trick Room up, and now that Amoonguss was gone, Snorlax was pretty free to set up and win the game from that point. Other things is like, if I can get rid of the Lele early, then I can get Koko back in to put on the pressure and block Amoonguss Spore. So there's a myriad of options, and Landorus is not bad to bring, but it's also hard because it just doesn't take hits, because a lot of what I bring can just get completely destroyed with a double up or a single hit from some of these Pokemon. So requires really good pivoting, and you're just gonna have to make good reads, especially to get that early momentum. You have to make really good reads against the team. The Fini version is more manageable because Snorlax is a lot better against it, and you have to fake out. So, but usually you'll have to play around with it to figure it out. But it's gonna no matter what you bring, it's gonna require some good making some good reads, and really pivoting and positioning really well. The last team here, this team has really popped up as of late, been having really good success, and this one is a lead or a matchup I'm a lot more concerned about because I haven't flowcharted it well enough. I'm still trying to figure out the Taunt Gengar plus Helping Hand Clefairy lead is probably the scariest lead because it really, the Helping Hand Sludge Bomb just takes out Gardevoir when Gardevoir could normally live a Sludge Bomb, and then Taunt just stops Amoonguss because Amoonguss is really good against these teams for the most part, but Taunt Gengar really puts an end to that. And of course there's Incineroar that threatens it. So what I found with this, with the little experience I have against this team, is you gotta call the lead right. If they lead Gengar Clefairy, I found that Amoonguss Snorlax is actually a pretty solid lead against that. Still gonna require you to make a pretty good read that turn, but you have a little more option. You have a lot more options. And you still have to be careful of the trapping effect that Gengar has. And if they're gonna lead Incineroar Gengar, you have a little bit better. I think what I was leading against that was Gardevoir plus my own Incineroar. That would be a pretty good lead against that because my Incineroar a lot of times will speed creep. And if you think they're going to lead the Azumarill mode, leading Gardevoir Koko is really good to pressure the Azumarill with the Hyper Voice and the Electric move. And if they lead like Clefairy Azumarill or Incineroar Azumarill, they have to really pressure or stop the Koko from taking out the Azumarill. So sometimes they bring Como, sometimes they don't. It's really dependent on the player you're playing. Como is not as big of a threat with the Double Fairy, but it can still, if played well, can cause problems. But yeah, U-Turn Landorus I really want to try out specifically for this matchup because I can get out of the Gengar Shadow tag that way. And that's what's also good about U-Turn Landorus and Volt Switch Koko. But again, I don't know about Landorus in this matchup because of the Azumarill, but it's a work in progress, and I think you guys should really try and figure it out as well. And let me know what you think if you have any ideas. But I think if you can get their leads right, you can get really far ahead and try and capitalize off that. So yeah, lead well. That's I think my best answer to that matchup. Alright, and then here's a few other matchups I think are worth mentioning. Even though some of them aren't the most common matchups, but they're still matchups that can be troublesome, or they're just, like I said, just really worth mentioning how to play. So the Rain matchup in particular is what I want to focus on here, but Rain Steel is pretty brutal because Steel type's obviously very threatening to the centerpiece of the team, which is Gardevoir, and the Rain mode really threatens the things that I want to use to beat the Steel types, namely Incineroar and Landorus. So, and I have a myriad of options here for Steel types because there's quite a few that can pair up with Ludicolo and Pelipper or Politoed. So, and whether it's Politoed or Pelipper, they both have their own kind of merits against the team, and they both have their own weaknesses, where obviously Pelipper is a lot easier to knock out because Gardevoir's Hyper Voice will sometimes knock it down to its Sash, but it has the Hurricane to threaten Amoonguss, where if it's a Politoed, Amoonguss is a little better because you can redirect Politoed's attacks. But also Politoed has a Helping Hand, which a Helping Hand Hydro Vortex will KO Snorlax, because against these teams, I like to lead Snorlax because priority number one is get rid of the Ludicolo, or at least pressure it out. And if you do pressure it out, you have to be aware of it giving it a free switch back in to use a fake out to its advantage. So number one, get rid of the Ludicolo, and I like to use Snorlax for that. I do like to lead Snorlax, especially against Pelipper teams, because they can't double up Snorlax and take it out. Against Politoed teams, it'll be a little trickier because they can't go for like the Helping Hand Hydro Vortex to take it out. So Gardevoir, Snorlax, pretty decent lead here. And because of that, I would, either switch Gardevoir or maybe go for an attack, because if he does Hydro the Gardevoir, it has a chance to live. And then I have Frustration the Ludicolo, because that'll usually do half to a Hydro Vortex variant. If it is a Politoed version, maybe leading a Amoonguss Snorlax isn't bad, because you can at least Sludge Bomb the Ludicolo and maybe switch out Snorlax. Not really much to switch into though, so you might just have to take the chance there. But yeah, getting rid of Ludicolo, really important. As far as the Steel types go, Ferrothorn I find is by far the most difficult Pokemon, because I have to bring Incineroar to deal with a Ferrothorn. There's just no way around it. I need Incineroar to beat the Ferrothorn. So it becomes a game of get rid of the Ludicolo so Koko can kind of come in and threaten all the other stuff. So Incineroar can then come in and finish off with Ferrothorn. But at the same time, you have to deal with the Ferrothorn. So I find that really pivoting Incineroar around to threaten the Ferrothorn to keep it kind of at bay, but you got to keep your Incineroar safe too. And the hardest part with this matchup is having good switch-ins. So you have to call some really good, you have to make some good calls on plays and get your free switches. So really brutal, but definitely doable. Just comes with practice, and yeah, like I said, Ferrothorn is probably the most frustrating one to deal with. Scizor, I haven't had much experience with it, but at least Amoonguss can redirect its attacks. The Trick Room team, a lot of times, like I said, I just lead Gardevoir Snorlax, or mostly I'll lead Incineroar Snorlax, because the Incineroar a lot of times have the faster fake out against their Incineroar, or Snorlax can pressure them to not set up Trick Room, and if they do, I can get a Belly Drum up to do some damage. And a lot of times I'm leading Gardevoir and Snorlax, or Incineroar Snorlax, and then I have Amoonguss in the back. I don't really need Koko against Trick Room because Koko's really bad against Trick Room, like really bad, obviously, because it's so fast and frail. So yeah, so those are the four I usually will bring, and they usually work out pretty well. Especially if they don't have a way to stop Spore, then Amoonguss is really solid, since I'm not bringing my own Koko to stop it. And yeah, so just utilize the Snorlax in that way, and try and capitalize off their Trick Room, and just let them set up Trick Room, and punish them for setting up Trick Room for you even. And then Gardevoir is the fastest Pokemon out of everything in those matchups a lot of the times, so you want to take advantage of that when their Trick Room isn't set up, and just spam those Hyper Voices. And then finally, worth mentioning here is the Mirror Match. This is why we have the Speed Creep in Gardevoir, because generally the faster Gardevoir will win the Mirror. And so one cool thing is leading Gardevoir Koko into another Gardevoir. If my Gardevoir is faster, I threaten the Gigavolt Hyper Voice KO on their Gardevoir, and it forces them to play a little defensively, or to play very aggressively in the hopes that I don't go for that. And then Incineroar has Speed Creep to try and outspeed other Incineroar to get the fake out advantage. And then if it's a Finny Gardevoir team, Snorlax is a lot better because Finny is a much more passive Pokemon, especially like a Finny Zapdos combo. Much more passive, and Snorlax loves passive Pokemon. You do have to watch out for Haze. They will carry Haze a lot of times, so gotta play around that. And if it's a Koko variant, Amoonguss I like a lot better because Amoonguss has a much better time dealing with the Koko as far as Rage Powdering. Snorlax still could be a good option, just depending on the team composition of the Gardevoir team. But again, biggest thing is keep Gardevoir safe, utilize the speed advantage of your Gardevoir over their Gardevoir, as assuming you have it, and just take advantage of that and keep your Gardevoir healthy while you try and get rid of their Gardevoir. It's one of those things where knock out one Pokemon and you have a lot clearer path of how to go about winning the game. So, and that should cover it for the matchups here as briefly as I could without rambling too much. Alright, here I wanted to kind of show you guys some of the different Gardevoir teams that have had success, because there are different variants of the team you can run, and some that don't even use Amoonguss, which obviously I'm not a huge fan of, but other people can do it. It's doable. It's not like you need Amoonguss, it's just something that I think I need. But anyways, that aside, these are some of the teams that have done well throughout the season, especially more recently, and I'm going to try to find some team reports, because I know there's a couple team reports of these, and I'll link them in the description below so you can check out what their teams are. And I know the couple of them are also on Pokemon.com. If you go to the tournament results, you can look up some of the sets they use. You just won't get EV spreads, but still, you can at least get an idea of what they're trying to do. So yeah, check those out. Worth trying out. If you want to try out Gardevoir and you want to try out some other different ideas with it, do that. And yeah, I think that about sums that up. Alright, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I did get the original team from Adrian Siegler Andrade, who goes by Saigaloo VGC on Twitter. He gave me the team and the pace actually at the regionals he won with, and he gave it to me before he even played in Top Cut, which was really gracious of him to trust me with that information, which I am appreciative of. But so like I said, he won the regionals with this team. He had another variant of it which he did pretty well at Utah with, and he also did build this team with Justin Burns. I need to give credit to him as well, because he also helped build the team. And Justin Burns actually won the last online international challenge with this team and his own sort of sets and movesets and such. So again, so credits to Adrian for giving me the team and allowing me to be able to kind of mold it into a way that fits me really well. And I'm really grateful because I really love this team, and this will probably just be the team I end up using the rest of the season, or rather at the beginning of the next season. Alright, and that pretty much sums up the entire team analysis. I have the links to a paste bin of the team that I used that I already just showed you in the description below, as well as a QR code. I set up a QR code for the team in the Pokemon Global link, so I'll put those links in the description below. Feel free to check those out, play with the team. And one final note is, play with the team, what I showed you, but as you play with it, start to figure out what you like, what works for you, because I think every team should be tailored to the individual. No team is perfect, and a lot of it comes down to the pilot of the team. So as you guys find a team and you start to like it, start tailoring it to the way you like it, but also like what's working for you and kind of how you're trying to utilize it. So that's why I encourage you guys to try the team out and just experiment with some things and see what you end up with, or you may just keep using exactly what you have, and because it works for you. Anyways, guys, all right. So that sums things up. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check this out. Leave a like and leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and leave any suggestions for anything else you want to see. I'll try and do more of these team analyses of teams I use on the channel. So, alright guys, have a great day and take care, and we will see you in the next video. See ya!